I'm so very excited and so very elated about the critical work that's going on right now through the center. We want to express some thanks definitely to the National Science Foundation and NSF Includes for the funding that has been given to us to begin this work around creating opportunities that would not naturally or that has not traditionally been there for URMs and other populations that just haven't been a part of the STEM world. Now, part of that is we understand that students need things that are going to help them be able to be more prepared or to be able to be persistent in their work. And the other side of that is that it's about our amazing faculty and the critical work that you do every day in the classroom, functioning as an instructor, as a specialist in your content area, but also, you know, a lot of times as a mentor or a counselor to these students, as well as any of the other people that are on the call who are working in advising, who are working in administration. All of these pieces fit together for us to build out something that is going to be viable. And so we have our first session for the work we're doing around developing and modeling mindsets in STEM and beyond, starting today. And I want to introduce you guys, you wonderful, beautiful people, to an amazing faculty member and colleague of mine at the University of Virgin Islands, the only HBCU with its own. Just want to put that out there. And this is Dr. Diana Bowen, who is a professor over in the College of Math and Sciences. She has an amazing grasp of this concept around mindset and has been doing this for a length of time in her career as a student as well as a professional. And she has an amazing role here at UVI, not only as a person that's teaching mathematics, but she has bridged over and spans also in the College of Education, really preparing our pre-service teachers for critical work around math instruction. So she is really going to be such an asset to everyone that's on the call. But she also understands that this is not just about STEM. We understand that students need a cohesive ability. Our faculty need an ability to be able to create something that's holistic for students to be excellent, to be learners in every space. So I want to introduce you guys to, you know, one of my favorite people, Diana Bowen. And she's going to wow you. So I just hope that you're going to really commit the time, invest the energy to be able to become good, because anything that we do well, anything worth learning is worth the time and the effort. So I just want to commend everyone for being on the call, being in this session, so that we can be the best that we can be in our learning spaces and create opportunities for our students that they never imagined. So Diana, if you're there.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Cummings, for that amazing introduction. And I hope I can inspire today with our work and this presentation. And so as Dr. Cummings said, we're going to be looking at learning and modeling growth mindset research. And today is really about learning, reflection, and thinking about language and feedback statements. And you'll see as the sessions progress, we hope to move more into classroom strategies, and then later on actual tools such as observation protocols that you can use in your classroom to see how you're addressing growth mindset. So let me go ahead and get started with our timeline for today. And so our timeline for session 1, I'm going to do a brief introduction. I'm then going to talk about the strengths in our teaching. And so that's looking back at our Flipgrid assignment. And I so enjoyed watching all of those. And thank you for all of you that participated. And for those of you that are able to go back and do it at the end of the session, that's excellent as well. I look forward to seeing those videos too. And then we're going to take some time to reflect. I'm going to share out some of our reflections from our first reflective journal. And then you'll also have a chance to do a second reflective journal and discuss that with your peers in this professional development. We're then going to do an activity on growth and fixed mindset and figuring out how we feel about certain skills and abilities and how we're thinking about them. Do we think of it as something that we can get better at, or do we think about it as being something that we're innately good at? and then we'll take a short break. And then we're going to come back together, and the bulk of the second part of our session is for the practice of noticing and naming students' strengths. That's where my background comes in and my research. I look at that in mathematics classrooms, in K-12 classrooms. And so thinking about how we can start to look at students' strengths even when work is incomplete or incorrect. And I hope to leave you with a tool at the end of that session that can help you observe students' strengths, whether you're observing live, looking at video, or looking at student work samples. And then lastly, at the end of the session, I will ask you all to do an exit ticket. And then I'll also talk some about our activities for our next session. So first off, an introduction to the session. So I think Dr. Cummings already did a nice job of introducing me. So a little bit more on my background. As you know, I'm at the University of the Virgin Islands, and my research interests are how prospective teachers notice and name students' mathematical strengths and resources, and what language they use to frame those strengths and resources. That's one of my lines of research. My second line of research is working with elementary mathematics specialists and thinking about how we can build a program here at the University of the Virgin Islands for those specialists. And then lastly, I thought I'd share my teaching strength from my Flipgrid video. And one of my strengths in my teaching is that I try and never say something the students can say. So when we're using prior knowledge and the students are able to contribute, I step back and ask students, oh, what did we do last class that helps us today? So that's something I always try and do with my teaching. All right, now our learning objectives for this session. We want to know the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. It seems like there's, as you'll see on a later slide, we come in with different experiences around growth mindset training. And so helping us learn from each other and making sure we know the difference, but also that we can recognize ambiguous language and when we need to delve deeper and determine what the student really means based on context. We're also going to understand how growth mindset and fixed mindset played a role in our own education, both as a student and as an educator. And you already got some of that experience with our first reflective journal. We're also going to think about how growth mindset plays a role in math and science. And we're actually extending that now. We're going to look some and think some about what that looks like in student affairs as well as engineering based on the poll results from you all. I found out a lot of you are in student affairs departments, so I want to make sure I work with all of you to give you tools that are specific to your area, your discipline. We're going to be able to identify examples of language that use a growth mindset perspective. And then you're going to be able to create feedback statements that highlight students' strengths and resources. So really working on how we give feedback. All right, before I do professional developments or teaching, I like to set up some Zoom norms. I want to note that this article is available online, and you'll see the resource in the bottom right corner. The reason I say that is something I learned from doing our pre-session activities is a lot of us are looking at ways to set up participation and use Zoom in the fall if we are doing, online teaching, or if we're doing some combination of online teaching and in-person teaching. And so these are some Zoom norms that I've adapted from that paper. I think it's incredibly helpful. Go check it out. So Zoom norm number 1, we'll do our best to start and end on time. Zoom norm number 2, we're going to make space and take space. So a lot of us, we've been teaching a while, we've been participating in meetings for a while. You have a good idea of what role you play in a meeting or in a professional development session. So just be aware of your airtime and challenge yourself to speak more if you don't like to normally participate in professional developments. The good news is we'll be in small sessions for a lot of today because there are 45 of us in this session right now. So that's something to keep in mind. Next, one mic. So try not to interrupt. And if you do apologize, and we've already done a good job of this, mute your mic when not talking. And as we learned through our test, also unmute your mic when you are talking, since we automatically muted them for you. You have the right to pass. So when we're doing reflections, sometimes they're deeply personal. So you always have the right to only share what you are comfortable sharing, and keep that in mind throughout all of our sessions. Next, speak to your experiences. Recognize that we are a diverse group of educators from across the country with different experiences across our our family experiences, our personal experiences, and our educational experiences. So when we're talking, we don't want to assume that our narrative is a universal or our experiences are universal. And so that's something to keep in mind. Use personal pronouns and gender conscious language. Understand the difference between intent and impact. Try and understand and acknowledge the impact. So thinking about, I might have intended this with my comment, but what was the impact on the rest of the participants in this session? Next, be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And I learned from a lot of the Flipgrids that a lot of you are very comfortable with teaching and being in your classrooms and sharing out with both your students and your colleagues. So I think we're going to do well with that one. Last, a couple more norms. Just be aware that private messages in Zoom can be seen by our hosts. We have a couple of people on here that are technical support as well. And so if a question does come up, you're welcome to use the chat box to ask a question during the presentation. And my technical support will make sure I get that question. And then lastly, if you have another norm you think is important for our community, you can add it in the chat box now, and we'll work on thinking about how to work that norm into our future meetings. So I just want to set up those Zoom norms. And now I want to move into our actual activities for the day. So first, I want to debrief from one of our pre-session activities. And what I did is I really enjoyed watching all of your videos the last few days. And I wanted to just share out some of the amazing strengths that we already have as educators. And when it says ×2, that just means at least 2 people said it. A lot of you named more than one strength, which was great too. So thinking about how are we successful teachers? And so I'm going to read through these, and so you'll hear how some of you all are thinking about your strengths. Some of our strengths are my ability to connect with my students. I use a lot of active learning. I like to keep struggle productive. I have patience. I'm very responsive. There are lots of ways to get a hold of me. I care. I like to make students feel comfortable. I'm good at getting students to collaborate and work together. I use students' funds of knowledge. I use a student-centered approach. I give good explanations. I emphasize learning is an ongoing endeavor. So that's really a growth mindset tenet right there. I emphasize learning is an ongoing endeavor. I'm good with student engagement. I like to hear what students are thinking. I personally loved that one because my background is in teacher noticing, and noticing what students are thinking is a huge part of responsive teaching. I identify the unique contributions of each student. I bring interactivity to my class. I have a unique perspective because I have been in the industry. I relate well to students who tend to struggle with math. My ability to relate content back to students' everyday lives is a strength. Connecting one-on-one with students. That's especially important in a time like right now where we're often communicating with our students online. And the last two, thinking of creative ways to help students understand the course material. That's another strength. And lastly, motivating students. So one, a lot of you also talked about these as areas of improvement. So knowing that you all are resources for each other. We all come into this professional development experience with different strengths. And so understanding how we can learn from each other and say, oh, I saw your Flipgrid. You talk about this strength that you motivate students. What are some ways you've done that in the past? And so I really wanted to use this to create space for us to have conversations about how to learn from each other and utilize each other's resources. So thank you again. Side note, I like to also talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing from a teaching perspective whenever I'm doing a professional development for educators. So what this let me do in the first 10 minutes of our presentation is bring in your voice. So what I really wanted to do here in terms of the facilitator is let everybody hear how you all are thinking about your strengths early on in the presentation. So my goal with this was to quickly bring in your participant voices. All right, now we're going to go to talking about some of our prior experiences as students and instructors. And first, I just want to share results from our poll. And so results from our pre-session poll. Our first question was, how much do you know about growth mindset research? And background, we had 51 people participate, and you can see that we have a range of experience. So some people said, I have no idea, but I want to know. And hopefully the articles and videos I shared gave you a little bit more about what growth mindset research looks like. 20 people said, I know a little bit. 14 people said, I'm secure on the facts, but want to know how to use it. So that's really, they're like really excited about sessions 2 and 3 when we get into some of those strategies. And then having, the last section, 11 people said they have experience using it and looking to develop further. So once again, zooming out from a facilitator perspective, we use this information. Our technical team later on will be in breakout sessions, and it was really important to make sure we had people from each of these 4 groups in your breakout room. So that's the idea behind mixed ability grouping. I wanted people who have not a lot of background in growth mindset research to have the opportunity to reflect with people who do have a lot of experience. So that was something why we did that poll ahead of time, and that was my thinking behind it. The other poll is, how convinced are you about growth mindset research? And that really helped me understand what articles to include, what your experiences are in terms of reading about growth mindset research, and what I should do in the pre-session activities. So I thank you all for participating, and I wanted you to know that we're using these results to both develop the professional development content, but also so we can be proactive about our grouping in these Zoom breakout sessions. Now, in order to make sure you had a chance to think about fixed mindset language, growth mindset language, and also I'm going to throw in ambiguous language, I've created a sort activity. And so what we're going to do now, this is an individual activity, but it's a chance for you to take what you knew in the readings and videos and think about it. So what I did is I set up something called a sort activity in Desmos. And when you click on this link, you'll see that you have a bunch of, I guess, flashcards. They're on the screen, so they're not quite flashcards. But your goal is to sort each of the phrases and determine if the phrase is fixed mindset, is it growth mindset, or is it ambiguous language? And the reason I wanted to do that is that oftentimes we think everything fits neatly into one of those 2 boxes. But you'll see that without context, sometimes it's difficult to know what the student meant when they made that comment. And I've set a timer on my cell phone. So take a moment, click those links, and go try that sort.
Diana, can you drop the link in? Oh, somebody did already. Thank you.
So as you all work on this activity, I've shared my screen again, and now you'll actually see sort of the background on what this looks like if you wanted to use this activity with your students. Desmos was meant to be a platform for mathematics teachers. I am a mathematics teacher. I taught high school mathematics for 5 years before I went back to graduate school. And I want to emphasize Desmos is so much more than a mathematics platform. As you can see with this experience, I was able to create a sort that focuses on growth mindset and fixed mindset. And so that's something to think about. This is a tool you can use, a free tool you can use with your students. And then I picked Brian's. And so what you can see here is that he's actually in the sort right now doing this sort, okay? And so that's something to think about, is you can look at how each of your participants are participating in this sort, who's done, who needs more time, who might not be in the program right now. So that's what's really nice about this feature, is you can monitor it as a teacher in real time. You'll see I clicked anonymize and it gave you all famous mathematicians as names. And so we can see how Fibonacci's doing. All right, we can see how Ada Lovelace is doing. All right, so now that you all have had a chance to do that individual activity, I want to share with you how I sorted them. I want to emphasize that I think there's always context when we use language. You always have to look at a larger context. So you may disagree with me on some of these statements I chose as ambiguous language. And so what you'll see here is that I sorted 6 cards as growth mindset. And what you hear behind all of these cards are things about learning from your mistakes, trying new strategies, improving, working harder, and these ideas behind effort. Okay, when you look at the fixed mindset cards, you hear ideas about innate ability. I need to be flawless. I need to be perfect. All right, trying new things is stressful. That's a common sign that a student is stuck in sort of this fixed mindset space. I do not like to be corrected. That's another thing that might inhibit a student from having a growth mindset. I want to give up and quit. All right. That one I've also seen people put in ambiguous. So once again, this is why you sometimes need more context. And then lastly, I'll never get this. And so this idea that students often give up when it doesn't come to them right away if they have this fixed mindset. What I really want to you to take away from this, that the articles don't go into depth about, is that there's ambiguous language. When you think about something like, this is too hard, you need to ask the student more. You need to know, why is it too hard? Okay, is it that they don't have the right resources? Is it that they don't understand the directions? Is it that they need additional support from you with the content? And so that's something to think about. Whenever you hear a student making a statement, am I investigating the intent of their statement? What are they telling me here? And then the other thing that they might say is, they might say something that could go either way. I'm amazing at math. Okay, well, maybe you're amazing at, trying out challenging problems in math and working on a problem till you get the right answer. And that might be, you're taking a more fixed mindset approach to being amazing at math. Amazing at math could also mean you did things the fastest and you got the most right, all right? And that you think you were born with this math ability. And that could be more of a fixed mindset perspective. So I just wanted to share that out, that after the readings and the 2 videos I shared with you all, that I was hoping all of you would sort of understand what this language can look like. But then I also wanted to add on to that, we also have this ambiguous language. And if you have any questions about this activity, feel free to ask, all right? All right, now, before we move into our first breakout room and do a reflective journal, I wanted to once again bring in your voices to debrief about the first journal I asked you to complete. And so one of the questions you responded to was, how did your parents, professors, and/or teachers praise you as you were growing up or in college? Did they tell you how smart you were, or did they focus on how hard you worked? And these are some of your responses. I worked really hard and strongly believed effort was the key. I was definitely praised for being smart, with the common gifted response of becoming a perfectionist and figuring any failure meant I was anything but. When I was a child, my parents praised my hard work in and out of the classroom.
Mainly Tableau and stuff.
My parents definitely praised me for being smart and not on how hard I worked. This person I loved, I forget who posted this, but they wrote in their journal, they gave quotes that they used to hear, that they got on their report card. A pleasure to have in class. What a wonderful student. All right, so often thinking about what do those summative assessments say about us. And then lastly, the praise that I remember receiving was typically more focused on talent or smarts than effort. I was labeled gifted, and there was a sort of expectation that I would be smart and good at things without much effort. So the reason I wanted to ask this question is oftentimes when we as educators think about how something works, we think back to our own experiences. So much so, this phenomenon in education, we actually call it the apprenticeship of practice. It's the idea that you're more likely to draw on your own experiences and think about what being a student looked like for you and use that in your teaching. So it's to open your eyes to say, some of us, we heard those growth mindset phrases. We were praised on really hard work and believing effort was the key. Others of us had experiences where we were often praised on being smart. And our professors, our parents, our teachers focused on us being smart, us being talented, us being perfectionists, us being gifted. And so the point of this activity was just to make you aware. How are my own experiences influencing me as an educator? How am I taking those experiences and thinking about what that means in my own classroom? And I want to share out a little more from our second part of our journal. How do you praise others? So now thinking about how do we move from our own experiences to what we do as teachers and people. And so here are some of your responses. I typically praise outcomes for those that have good outcomes and effort for those that are struggling. I'm hoping that I'll learn to be more conscious of the words I choose to use when I'm talking with my students. I picked this response because language matters. When I wrote my prompts for the Flipgrid, I used the word teaching. I asked you about your teaching, not you as a teacher. And that seems subtle, but those words matter. So I really appreciated this debrief, this person's particular response, because they're really capturing the heart of it. Those simple word choices and the language we use with our students and our family matters. The next response, I too praise others by giving them positive feedback regarding their efforts and their process of arriving at their intended result. There is beauty in the struggle process and the importance of celebrating the small victories along the path to their end goal. This response was really important to me because they talk about the process and how we need to give feedback around effort and true struggle. And so I really thought that captured growth mindset, tenets of growth mindset, and very nicely. Next, I try to praise others for their effort and growth, even for their mistakes and being willing to make them, but I slip up all the time with superficial praise. Yes, it is so hard. I wrote a dissertation on this. That's all I thought about was how do I notice student strengths in the math classroom and how do I verbalize them? I still catch myself occasionally using superficial praise or what I call empty praise. Carol Dweck calls it empty praise. That's where I got it from. And it's this idea that sometimes we say good job or good question and we forget to tell students why. Or we're trying to praise them in a certain way and it sounds like an innate quality. And so I loved this response because it gets at the fact that this work is hard. This work is not easy. Even when we're trained in it, we still have to actively think about the decisions we make in the classroom moment to moment to do this well. All right, we have two more. I catch myself still praising for intelligence. Every so often with my niece when we talk on the phone, I make sure to elaborate on the praise to fix my mistake when I notice, but praising for intelligence is definitely more ingrained for me. I love this because it's a reminder when we say something and the feedback statement is not what we intended, you can say it again in a new way. All right. When we teach in the moment and we make those comments in the moment, sometimes it's good to step back and say, what I just said is problematic. Here's why. All right. So I really liked how this response captured that. And lastly, the last response, I work to praise strategies, choices, or struggle. So really getting at what should we be praising? Okay. How do I do this in a way that I'm praising and I'm giving feedback to promote a growth mindset? Now, what we're going to do now, you're eventually going to be put in small groups. But before you do that, you've all been given access to a Google Classroom. And so one, check your email that you signed up for this, this professional development, and you should have an email and you should be able to access your Google Classroom. Two, there is an opportunity in the Google Classroom for a second reflective experience. So you're going to get about 5 minutes to write about an experience that triggered you to have a fixed mindset, reaction, or behavior. So possible examples might include doing something publicly when you didn't feel confident about it, being criticized in a way or laughed at in a way that felt unfair or humiliating, feeling frustrated that things weren't going as planned in a high pressure situation like a tight deadline. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that third one. And then lastly, performing a new task in front of others with more experience or skill. That one hit home for me. I've been an educator for 12 years now, but a lot of you have a lot more experience than me in higher education, as my background is in K-12. And so recognizing that today I'm doing something that's a new experience for me, and that I'm presenting parts of this professional development in higher education for the first time, when usually I present parts of this to practicing or prospective teachers. So I just wanted to share out that I feel that while some of these may be broad, I'm sure you can think about an experience that fits one of these 4 categories or your own category. And then I want you to describe the event. So tell me some about the context, how you felt, and what you were thinking. And then lastly, how did you behave or react? So what's going to happen? Go into Google Classroom, find your space to write. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to write, and then you're going to get an opportunity to share out in breakout rooms around these experiences. All right, I am going to go ahead and set that timer. And go ahead, and if you're having issues with Google Classroom, please let us know. Oh, Janae, do you want to speak for a moment? Go ahead.
I just sent you 2 questions related to the comments made about empty feedback or empty praise, and how we can be careful about that or should be careful about that. There's 2 questions, and then I don't know if that's something you want to answer later after the activity. It may come up, but just wanted to make you aware.
I will save those questions for the second half of our presentation. I will write them down right now. And after our break, when we actually look at some research around feedback in particular, I'll come back to these questions.
Hello, I'm a little confused. Do we write a reflection now, or are we waiting to go into the breakout room?
Oh, sorry, you write your reflection first, and we'll be setting up those breakout rooms. And in terms of where you post that second reflection, thank you. Okay, there we go.
Do we post it in the class comments under there, or?
That's a great question. Some people have been posting it as a comment. Some people have been posting it as an assignment, either one is fine. We'll find it either place.
If you don't have access to the Google Classroom, just go ahead and put your email in the chat box and we'll make sure that you get access to the Google Classroom. And Ada actually placed the classroom information and code in the chat box.
I see a lot of people still have not either submitted a comment or as an assignment, so I'm going to give about 2 more minutes. All right, so what we'll be doing on the technical end is our technical team is going to be putting you all in breakout rooms. And you have 2 tasks in that breakout room. First, you're going to go around and everybody who wants to share their experience has an opportunity to share. So take a moment and introduce yourself and share out what you were thinking about for this reflective writing. After everybody has shared, you're then going to get a chance to think about the following debrief questions. So are there any strategies that would help you respond differently in the future? For example, what might you say to yourself? What might you do differently? Who might you seek support from? All right. Then you're also going to work to relate your experiences to students' experiences. And then lastly, you're going to talk about the activity. Was this useful? How might you use this with your students? Is there anything you would do differently? So you'll be put in breakout rooms. Step 1 is to share out your reflective writing piece. Step 2 is to address these debrief questions as a group. And if you're wondering how I can see the debrief questions, they also are posted in activities for session 1. Let me see if I can toggle over there. And so you'll see here, there's a place where it says reflective journal debrief. And if you click on that, it just gives you the prompts so that you can have them in front of you. And we're going to set a timer and you'll be able to see that countdown in your breakout room. Any questions before we move to those breakout rooms? All right, we are manually moving 46 people, so please give us a moment while we do that. That's a great question. Does everyone have a minute to talk? Everybody will have about a minute. Will breakout rooms be recorded? Is there someone on the technical team that can answer that for us?
We can go in the rooms and record them, I believe. We just have to.
But I think the question is, are we going to record them? Like, is it a safe space?
I think we should leave it that way. That's
okay,
fine.
Perfect. That's
Yeah,
what I wanted to confirm that they weren't being recorded.
Yes, space. Let's keep it that way.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
And then
they know about the roles.
Does everyone have a minute to talk? So I purposely left this a little bit open-ended. I didn't give you all group roles for this particular activity. Our next activity, you'll have some specific group roles and you'll see how those two activities play out differently. So this is more one that's a free-for-all, and it's purposely set up that way because I want you to see that sometimes it's helpful to put a little intent into how we set up groups and how we group students together, and then what roles we have students take once we're in that group.
Okay, and I just want to let a note is that there's going to be some people in breakout rooms that won't have access to their Google Classroom, but you still can participate. So you can still participate in your breakout room. So if you don't have access, don't panic. You can still participate.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, before I go room to room, you guys want to give me any pointers, feedback, things I can do better? How do you think we're doing so far? This is definitely sort of the slower part. It was a lot of me presenting up front. Now we're moving past that.
Yeah. And I think you kind of let them know about that. Hang on, who has recording access? Can you press pause recording so I don't have to edit this too much?
All right, welcome back everybody. And thank you for letting me and some of our other facilitators and staff here drop in on your conversations. It seems like there are a lot of conversations around experiences, and then some of the groups were transitioning to strategies and what it means for them as a teacher and what it means for your students. What have you learned from your own experiences? So thank you for being reflective. I think being reflective about your experiences as an educator and as a student is incredibly helpful for when you think about how you approach similar situations with your students. And then I actually dropped in on a conversation, and Irene asked this great question, and she said, how do you tell the difference between something that's more of a characteristic, who you are as a person, versus whether or not it's a fixed mindset trait and something that you need to work on? And that actually is a perfect segue for our final activity before the break. And so let me tell you some about that activity. And so our last activity before the break is we're going to look at skills and abilities using a continuum. And so what you're going to do, not yet, but you're going to be in groups and you're going to have a list of items, and they're going to be different traits and abilities. And you're going to place yourself along a mindset continuum. And then once everybody in your group is on the continuum, you're going to have a discussion around it. And you're going to use these prompts. You can use either of the prompts to guide your discussion. So let me actually go forward a slide. And then I'm going to go backwards. But this gives you a sense as to what the screen will look like. This has our branding from our institute, but it will have slightly different colors on your screen when you go into the Google Classroom. But basically, every group will have a set of these slides. And what you'll be able to do, you'll be able to pick a word from this list. So things like artistic ability, creativity, extroversion, how extroverted you are, intelligence, athleticism, math ability, and your ability to pay attention. And then what you'll be able to do on the Google slide is you'll be able to pick your meeple up, and you all will have to claim colors. We'll talk more about that. And you're just going to drag them over onto this continuum. And you'll be able to do that in your groups. Once everyone's placed themselves on the continuum, you'll have a chance to discuss, all right, sort of what happened. Where is everybody and why? And so going back to Irene's question, okay, some of these, all right, there's no right or wrong answer. This is how we feel. Okay, so understanding some abilities and traits we tend to see as things we can grow at, we can improve, we can get better. There are other abilities or traits we tend to say are innate. And so thinking about, oh, what do I think about this particular trait? Where do I think that trait falls? And that's what this activity is about. Now, in order to make this activity run successfully, what I did is, and I might have to, yeah, I've got to stop sharing. I've just got to go back a slide. What I did, and this is related to a lot of what I do in terms of my research, is I set up group roles. And I didn't do that on the first task purposefully, because I wanted you to see sort of the difference of when you have group roles versus when you don't have group roles. And so I also gave some specific instructions around these roles. So you'll see on the slides, when you go into Google Classroom, you're going to get assigned a role. And I use something birth month. And then when someone, so if you're born in January to March, you're the facilitator. If you're born April to June, you're the task manager. And this is all on your Google slides. But the reason I did all of this is that when part of growth mindset research, all right, part of this idea of really setting up tasks to be successful in the classroom is having group-worthy tasks that really require all members of the group to participate. So for this particular task, you'll have someone who's facilitating, and they're really figuring out who is doing what. So they coordinate team members, they make sure everyone's picked a color, they pick a word from the list for you all to discuss and put on the continuum. All right, so that's the facilitator role. Next, you have the task manager. So you're more looking at, did everyone participate? Did everyone drag a meeple onto the continuum? And you're making sure everybody, that your group gets through at least 3 of them. You can do up to 7. You also have the resource manager. That's the person who, once you're in your small breakout room, your task was sharing the Google slide. And so that everybody will be in there anyway, but that way you have it up on your breakout room on the screen. And then lastly, you have your recorder reporter. So we're going to come back together after these small groups, and we're going to give each group 30 to 45 seconds for the recorder reporter to talk out about what their group noticed. Were there any continuums that were more controversial than others? Were there any continuums where everyone agreed? Are there any continuums where everybody disagreed? So sort of giving a sense of how the activity went for each group. So in order to access these slides, if you're in, let me toggle over. So when you're in Google Classroom, you'll see that it has this growth fixed mindset continuum folder. And you can click on that folder and you'll see that I set it up for every breakout room. So your breakout room number corresponds to which set of slides you go into. And then once you go into that set of slides, it gives you a little bit more about how to assign roles and if you have more than 4 people in your group. And then here's the actual setup. And so you'll see these slides and you'll have this chance to drag a word over. So maybe you want to talk about artistic ability and drag a meeple over. Maybe you think artistic ability, you can't really improve at that. And so that's the big idea. And then once everybody in your group has done that, you take a moment and discuss why you all placed the different meeples on the continuum where you did. You shouldn't be able to move anything else on the screen, just the list words and the meeple words, and that makes this activity work well in Google Slides. Any questions before I have our team send everybody off to our breakout rooms? This is our last thing before our break.
I'll go in the file and make sure it's edible real quick.
And someone asked, where do we find these resources? This is on the Google Classroom, but I did make the link available for everybody. So I'll also post it. Let's see.
Diana, you might have to go in when I get to that slide. It says view only, and I can't move the words or the people.
Oh. Let's see.
That should be a quick fix while Leslyn is moving everybody around. So.
Yes, I am running through them room by room right now and updating that. My apologies. Yes.
You're fine. You're fine. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny, please check your messages.
Hang on one second. I have to get back as the host real quick. Oh.
Let me see if I can get Diana to do that.
Diana, in the sake of time, I'm going to recommend if people can, I don't know the best way to individually go into if you remember your room number, maybe can you go into that Google, do you have a solution, recommendation, the best way to get the movement on the slide? Leslie's computer froze and I can't reclaim my access.
So, I've gone through and given everybody edit privileges on all the slides.
Perfect.
That should be good to go. I think the issue was just sending everybody to the breakout rooms. Okay, I know we have some internet access issues right now on our end, so thank you everybody for your patience. And Brian brings up a great mathematical point. When you use birth months for randomization, you sometimes get clumps of students. Last time I did this in a PD last month, everybody had a birthday in the same 3 months, so we had to get a little creative with the roles. The big idea is we try and avoid to have students and participants pick their roles, just because people tend to pick the role they're most comfortable with, and we want the opportunity to grow in a new role. And so that helps us assign them, but keep it a little more random. Janae, a second option is we could start our break and then we could set up with this activity when we come back. And then I'll think about a creative way to shorten our final activity. And yes, Brian, you will be in the same breakout room as before, not until after, well, our last activity today, you're in a different breakout room. So that's a great question. These are still based on your prior experiences with growth mindset. And our final set of breakout rooms is based on your content area.
I think that's a great idea to just go ahead and take the break. If you all get disconnected, just log back in because I have a feeling we're going to have to log out. But just come back in. I believe we are scheduled for 15 minutes. So right now it's 2:16, so let's aim for 2:30.
That's perfect.
And so if you get lost and you get off, just log back in at 2:30. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, everybody. See you after the break.
So Janae, can you transfer host? You on mute.